Welcome to the Embracing Race podcast. All episodes were recorded in advance, so don't be alarmed if the timeline seems a little bit cattywampus.
Welcome back to another episode of Embracing Race, Conversations with Truth and Intention. I have to get used to saying that because we don't record as often as we should. And
it's okay.
And we went back and forth with that daggone subtitle.
When I did the pre-work for it, I fumbled over that quite a bit. So we'll practice. I
am your host, Shawnee McElwain. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And Jessie, you can introduce yourself.
My name is Jessie Littlejohn. My pronouns are they and them. And our guest today is, go for it,
Jennifer Swanson, first guest. So excited. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm so honored and pleased to be with you.
I am so honored and pleased that you said yes. And just to set the stage for all those that are listening, recently had lunch with Jennifer and we were just, shooting the breeze and talking and just basically, where we came from, our Genesis story, which is always fun to talk to people when you first meet them. Like, how did you get here? And what prompted this is that do you shorten your name, Jennifer?
My friends call me Jen.
Okay. Are we friends?
If I'm your first guest on your podcast, I'm going to say yes, we are friends.
All right. So I'm shooting the breeze with Jen. We start to talk and she's a teacher for Japanese students. And I was like, because her students recommended the place we had lunch at. And I just was fascinated by how this, fully white woman, born and raised in California, spent time over in Japan, and like, how did she go to college and study Japanese and teach Japanese English? I wanted to know. And she started telling the story about her upbringing, and I was just fascinated. And so I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. Can you just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and that experience that you shared with me last week, being 6 years old and kind of like basically, flipping the script on your whole childhood.
Yeah, that is, thank you so much. I don't know. I didn't realize it was fascinating. I mean, it's just, my own background, right? So I'm just kind of going day to day like everybody is, just trying to get through the day. But then you have these encounters, like you and I had this encounter, and I just instantly felt a connection with you. And then I think the connection continued to grow. And since we're not on video, you can probably tell by the way I speak, my accent. I am full, straight on white girl from the suburbs of Los Angeles, middle, upper class, white area. Suburbs. My dad worked for Chevron oil in California. My mom was a school secretary, and we grew up with mostly white kids, like same kind of background, although there was this interesting Asian element. And I was in first grade in my regular old elementary school in California, and I noticed there was a Japanese girl in my class who didn't speak English. And I felt kind of sorry for her because she didn't have any friends. She couldn't speak English. Nobody could speak Japanese. And I thought, my 6-year-old self thought, I'll just be friends with her. That will just, that will help her. And, maybe it'll help me. I don't know. You're 6 years old. You're not thinking about this.
Right.
So I just played with her on the playground. I showed her how to play tetherball, showed her how to play foursquare. We spent a lot of time walking around the back field, which now that I think about it, is kind of weird. Like, why were the two of us just kind of walking around? And then a second Japanese girl, I'm not identifying myself as Japanese, a second, not third, a second Japanese girl moved into the school. And then the first friend, Kana, said, we should befriend her because she doesn't have any friends. And so I said, okay. So then it was the three of us walking around the field. And, you're a little kid. You don't really think about, is this odd or different,
Mhm.
or are people looking at me weird? And my mother, do you want me to go into my mother's
Yes,
reaction?
yes, I totally do.
God bless her. She she did the best she could, I've come to believe. But she was pretty limited in how she was able to see things. And very, very scared, I think, very motivated by fear of other or different or them versus us. And my dad was kind of absent, I would say. He was just off doing the madman corporate thing, whatever. So it was just, and I'm an only child, so it's just me and my mom. And I would invite these Japanese girls over and we would play, and never thought about it being weird or different. And then one day my mother said to me, don't you have any friends who speak English? And I'd never thought about that. I, first of all, communicated just fine with Kana and Sayuri. There was no problem there. So I didn't think they were different. Um, I also had some Chinese friends that I would bring over. There was a Chinese girl that lived in the neighborhood. I thought she was cool. You just kind of doing your little, I like to play outside. So I was always playing outside. It's California. So we're always outside, playing outside, riding bikes. I used to call them vehicles. Let's go ride vehicles. And always like weird, like, little big wheels and all the stuff we'd ride around. And we just had a little group of kids that would come over, and never thought it was weird until I guess my mother pointed that out. And then on the flip side of that, Kana's mom, I would go over to Kana's house after school. She lived near the elementary school, so she would invite me over, and it was like going into some kind of soft, warm, very welcoming, compared to what I was used to at home, which was, what is wrong with you? Why are you like that? You are doing the wrong thing. You are saying the wrong things. You are wrong. You are yourself. Your being is wrong. Kana's house was the complete opposite. I would go over there, and the mom would come in and she'd bring us little snacks on little plates with doilies, and give us little cups of tea, and bring us little cakes she had baked. And we would play in Kana's room, and Kana's mom would come in and check on us. How are you girls doing? Do you need anything? Do you want anything? I thought I died and gone to heaven.
Mm.
And that was, I think, my first introduction to Japanese culture, which really imprinted into me that it's this welcoming, warm, comfortable place. Now, there's a lot of things about Japan. I don't want to say I love Japanese culture, because that's just naive, right?
Right.
There's plenty of things about Japan that they need to work on, and we need to help them work on, and they need to help us work on stuff. And it's a whole thing. But my initial introduction to Japanese culture was that warm, sweet mom that would bring me snacks. And then I would go home and get pounded for being weird or different.
Mm. And how have you embraced that, like now, like just like going into your own, being comfortable in your own skin, being okay with, you know, coming from where you've come from to now, just like, you created a whole business around what you do. And so you didn't let that, I guess you didn't let that define who you were. Like you didn't like grow up and say, okay, I'm just going to do exactly what I was taught.
Yeah, it's such an interesting aspect looking back on it. How I overcame her vision of what I was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I would say again, my dad always told me, you can do whatever you want. You're smart. You can go to school. You can work, whatever. So my dad was, I think, generally supportive, but I didn't have a specific person that was helping me overcome some of these stereotypes or bridges or borders or whatever you want to say, except possibly the church. So I did have a message early on, even though we didn't go to church regularly. I did have a message that Jesus, remember that song? And this is like so horrible to even think about singing it now. But grandma used to sing, Jesus loves
Us the little children,
all the
all
little
the little
children,
children of the world.
all the little children of the
Yeah,
world,
right.
red, yellow,
Yellow,
black,
black,
and white.
white. They are
They are
precious in
precious
his
in
sight.
his sight.
Yes.
Jesus loves the little children of the world. I mean, it's horrible to even think about the
Right.
like color. What is that? That we could spend hours breaking that down. But the general message, I think, is good, which is Jesus loves all the children equally. It's
Right.
just a love that exists.
Funny story about that song. I used to sing it to my children until my now 22-year-old called me out and said, "You don't know any yellow people." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Who's yellow?" And I was like, "I do know Asian people." I'm in the car, like basically fighting with a 6-year-old. I'm like, "His name is Shin Woo. We went to work together much with him." I've never met him. Like, and it really caused me to, just to take inventory of who was around my kids and how I showed up in my mind. I was being so well diverse. They were around so many different cultures, so many different uh um gender identifying people. I thought I was it until, yeah, she called me out, and I was like, well, you know what, first of all, we're not singing that song again.
Or maybe we can adapt it. I mean, because
Right.
humans grow and adapt. Information about, where we were 20 years ago with that
Right.
song, for example, is not where we are now.
Right.
And we have to adapt things. Like, I'm a huge U2 fan, right? I can't be on a podcast without bringing up, worshiping at the foot of the U2 theology. But Bono sang that song for the Band-Aid. Remember this? The Do They Know It's Christmas? Do you remember this song? And they gave him that line, well, tonight, thank God it's them instead of you. And he has spent 30 years undoing that line, and he
Mm.
recently re-recorded it as something else and said, that's not how I feel. That's
Yeah.
not right, and I need to change that. And the whole concept of do they know it's Christmas even is sort of false, because a lot of Africa is Muslim. A lot of Africa is other religions. There's not the whole concept of the song is kind of off.
Right.
But I like how Bono said we can keep some of it, but we need to redo some of it.
Yeah.
And so much of our culture, I think, is that it's not completely throwing away everything, but it's looking at things, analyzing things, and then kind of going at it again. So maybe we need to write a culturally appropriate red and yellow, black and white,
Right.
because I guess that's that portion of the song, but that idea was in my head. Jesus loves all the children. And going through elementary school and then into middle school, I developed a medical problem, and I couldn't take PE class. So again, being kind of the kid that was a little bit different, even though I look like I should just be the regular kid, like the standard normal white kid in school, looks straight, just whatever, that it's not how I felt inside.
Right.
And I think my mother's, kind of cold upbringing for me made me always feel a little bit outside of everything, kind of out, and I know a lot of people that are kind of on the margins feel that way, like I'm not part of what's going on, in the mainstream, so to speak. And I guess then in middle school, I couldn't take PE class anymore because of this medical problem. And I went to the counselor's office, and he said, you're going to be removed from PE. And of course, nowadays there would be adaptations and accessibility issues and all kinds of things that would help. But then it was, you're in PE or you're not in PE. Those are your two choices. And he said, would you like to do study hour for an hour every day? Or would you like to be a teacher's aide, a TA for a class? And I always loved teaching. I always loved to teach people, even at that age. And I said, okay, well, I can be a TA. And guess what class it was?
What?
the ESL class.
Oh.
So I got assigned to be the TA for the ESL class, and the teacher, by the way, was a gay man. And that didn't exist back then, but he was a gay man, if you know what I mean. Like, he wasn't out, I guess. Sweetest man, and he really helped me embrace some of this teaching identity and working with the Asian kids.
Mm.
So it just like it's weird how, and then many years later, I'm gonna say like 15 years ago, I saw a clairvoyant, which is a person that sees things clearly, clairvoyant. And I walked in, and a friend of mine recommended seeing her just to kind of see see what she would say. And I walked in and sat down, and she said instantly, "I'm getting a Japanese vibe from you." I didn't say anything. And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Also, do you have a back problem?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Those two things are connected. The
Mm.
back problem is connected to the Japan identity or kind of arena." And she said, "The back problem led you to Japan." I mean, and she was exactly right. She didn't know what she was saying, like specifically that PE, not being able to take PE, put me in the situation with the Japanese kids. And then I went to Japan when I was 15, my first trip to Japan. But how all things work together for good,
Right.
all things in time. And it was horrible at the time in middle school. I mean, middle school for anybody is horrible, but anybody that's a little bit outside of what people think you're supposed to be doing. Um, but I kind of just kept going. And then there was this opportunity to go to Japan with my high school. My high school had an exchange with a high school in Japan, and it was like $500. Okay, this is 1986. So, who knows how much that is in today's like seemed like a lot of money. So let's say like $3,000 in today's money, like a lot of money. And I told my mom, "Hey, I think I want to go." The same mother that was trying to control me and keep me in my little space, in my little box. I said, "Hey, I think I want to go on this trip to Japan." And she said, "Why would anyone ever leave America?
Mm.
You're American. You should stay here." And again, I think that was mostly fear motivated, where she
Right.
was afraid, didn't understand. But that just kind of kicked me in the pants. And I was like, "Well, I'll just raise the money myself then." She's like, "If you want to go, you go on your own money." So I called my dad and said, "Can I sell all of the stuff in the garage?" And he said, "Sure." So I sold all the crap in the garage, raised my $500, and went to Japan.
Nice.
Wow.
And then, went again in college, and again, own money, funding your own, got to fund your own dreams, right? Got to fund your own dreams. If people don't get on board, then you have to just keep funding yourself and finding ways to
Mhm.
do stuff that you think that you need to do. And then, of course, I lived in Japan after college, 6 years living in Japan. And I'm a tall, 5'9", tall, very blonde, fair-skinned person. And living in Japan, everyone is like the average height of a woman, I think, is 5'3", and men are like 5'7". So, people say, "What did you do in Japan for 6 years?" And I go, "Oh yeah, blending in, just mostly blending in." People with Japanese friends, where are we going to meet? Just meet at me. Just find me. Well, how are we going to find you? You will see me because I'll be
Just look up.
towering
Look
over.
up.
Look out.
See me across the whole plaza. Oh, Jennifer's right there.
I'm the tall white lady over there.
I know. I had a tall British friend, a guy, and he was like 6'2", and we could see each other like a half a mile. We could see, like, "Oh, there's Paul. There he is." And he would wave, and I would wave, "Hello," and then we'd come
Love it.
together. But, Japan it's the flip side of whatever we do here. They eat with sticks, they eat rice, they drive on the left side of the road, they sleep on the floor, they eat, it's like whatever we do here, they don't do that there.
Right.
And it just got me more and more interested in how people do things differently, and culture, religion, gender identity, whatever. It just, yeah, I mean, what propelled me to do that? To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. You tell me. You guys have the you guys must have some answers.
I think it's all connected, honestly. I am a firm believer of whatever you've been through and however your journey starts, God uses all of that for God's glory. I whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's indifferent, right? And just being connected to our stories. I mean, even how we connected, I came to your church, I preached, and you were like, it was just something about you that I needed to get to know you better,
Well,
right?
I felt the same way. As soon as you
Right,
started preaching, I was like, wait a minute, who is this person? Looking in the book, and is it
right.
right? Do I know her? Where's she come from?
And it was just, and that's what I love about story, and especially our personal stories,
Mm.
is how, when we're able to share our story, how we realize that it is just a connection that can only be spiritual, in my opinion.
That there is spirit, and if you are connected with spirit, then you are part of something bigger than yourself, and
Mm,
you don't exist just to tick things off of your checklist. You exist, like you said, to be a part of the fabric of what makes humans, or what makes our country or the world or whatever. Because I had a friend, storytelling. I'm a good storyteller. So one of my best friends in Japan was Madison from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And Madison was a gay man, and they don't have that in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So he left Chattanooga to come to Tokyo, and he and I spent a lot of time together. There are a lot of gay guys in Tokyo because, trying to get away from, find your people. They're out there, and they're not always where you think they are. You have to go look for them, find your community. And he and I spent a lot of time together, and we would go to temples, Japanese Buddhist temples together. And I would approach the temple, and when you're in a Japanese, and when you're in a shrine, you actually throw money, and kind of the tinking sound of the money in the little donation box, and then you ring a bell, like with this huge rope, and you ring this big bell, and then you clap, because the idea is you're trying to get God's attention.
Hmm.
And then once you've gotten the attention, you say your prayer, you clap again, and then you leave. And I did that all the time. And in my mind, I prayed to Jesus. I was
Mhm.
not praying to some Japanese god that I wasn't familiar with. And Madison said to me one time, "Isn't this a conflict for you?" He had grown up, Baptist, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he said, "Isn't this a conflict for you?" And I said, "Absolutely not. It's all the same thing. It's just being expressed in a different way.
Mhm.
I don't have any problem with this."
mm-hmm.
And throwing money, he's like, "But you're throwing money?" I go, "That's how they do it here." And that's fine. I'm not here to judge how they pray.
Right.
I'm just here to learn. And then he got into it a little bit, but I think just that whole Baptist upbringing was a little constraining.
Mm.
And I always felt like it's just part of the same thing. And you'd go with Japanese people, and go with my friends, and they would do it, and then you'd have this moment where you connect with the person because you've prayed in a similar fashion. You're connecting with people, and my whole life. And I was asked to do this other presentation about cultural diplomacy for youth, and I was thinking about how important relationships are. And my whole life, I mean, as I've told you my life story in terms of the Japanese aspect, it's all been about the people I met, the people that helped me, the people I teach, people that taught me, friends. along the way. It's that it's the friends lowering the man, down through the roof to see Jesus, that you just depend on relationships. I'm a real relationship person, and a committee person. I want to, I want everybody, I want to know what everybody thinks about this, and then we move forward in church and in my nonprofit. But being in Japan and praying at the shrine, like with my Japanese mom, was just a bonding thing for us. And she prayed to something else, I don't know. She would often say, because I'd been around her enough, that she would start to say, God this, God that, God this, God that. And I don't know what concept in her mind. I don't think it was the Aryan Jesus
Right.
that most of us grew up with. I've got a manger scene upstairs that I call the Aryan manger scene. Just all the very white, very Nordic looking people at the, Joseph and Mary. But I don't think that's who she prayed to, but it didn't matter because it's all part of the same flow. We're all in the same, and this is kind of a Buddhist idea that we're all part of the same fabric. Or the when I visited a Koji Buddhist temple in Fairfax recently, I talked to the monk there, and he was talking about how all humans are part of the ocean. That, and then there are different waves that come onto shore, and then they break, but then they go back in. And there's so many different parts of the sea and the way the sea moves. And he thought of kind of humanity as the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And Christians Buddhism, the teachings of Buddhism and the teachings of Jesus have a lot in common. So if you actually study that, then you find out that the same kind of philosophies came out of two completely different places at different times, which I think is fascinating because God's hand is on all of this.
Right.
So
how did you become Presbyterian, Jen?
So we went to a Presbyterian church when I was little.
Okay.
And then when I was in high school, I joined a Presbyterian church with 120 kids in a youth group, and we just did amazing things in this youth group. So that was a big thing. But then later, as my grandmother was a Presbyterian choir director and church organist in Pennsylvania. So much later, I asked her, she was a very talented musician, and she passed away in 2008. I said, why are we Presbyterian? Because I know she grew up Methodist and my grandfather grew up Lutheran. And, how did we get, and she said, well, dear, I played for the Methodists for years and directed the choir. And, all women's work was always unpaid and unacknowledged and sort of assumed that you would just cook everything and do everything, clean everything. And, I said, so how did you switch to Presbyterian? And she said, well, dear, the Presbyterians offered to pay me. So we switched over to the Presbyterian church. And every time something comes up in a session meeting about should we pay the staff, or should we give the staff a bonus, or should we give the staff health care, I am always on my in the pulpit saying, yes, you have to pay people what they're worth. Mm-hmm. And you can't, and we're dealing with this at our church now, is how do we make, a fairer package for the children and youth director? And, we have to pay that. And of course, my example is my grandmother and how she was a faithful, wonderful music director for many years as a volunteer. And then, became a paid staff. I say, I don't know what group of 12 white men decided this, but God bless them. Because here we are today. Serving the church.
You were just asking me about that the other day when Shawnee and I were at an installation for a pastor. And Shawnee texted and was like, did they say that they were going to pay her family? And when they were doing their
it was so random.
Congregation, I was like, yes, they did. Don't worry, they did it.
It was so random because I literally woke up out my sleep. I don't remember that. Did they say that?
They did. Which
Yeah,
always
and
feels heavier when it's a woman that's being installed. Like, are you
Absolutely.
going to pay her fairly? Or a person who's been marginalized in some capacity, are you going to pay them fairly? They're always this important.
I do a lot of coaching, and a lot of my clients are pastors. And I had this one client who was basically in a contract negotiation dispute and with their session, and the rebuttal that was given to her was, well, the last pastor was here for 20 years and never got a raise. Do you think that's why they left? Like,
right, and that's criminal, and you owe her back pay.
and didn't give you notice, left with very little notice.
You
Do you
didn't pay
think
her
that
enough
might
for
have had
20 years.
something to do with it? Like, just insane.
Yeah, we need to get past that. That like a friend of mine, my best friend's mom says, that conversation makes my ass tired. It's tired of sitting here having the same stupid conversation about whether we should pay people a fair wage.
That is wild. It's wild. Well, I am just excited. Can you tell just a little bit about, you mentioned your nonprofit and then the work that you're doing now, Jen? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, and this has been, an ongoing process, and so I've been tutoring, teaching, coaching. So my teacher, a tutor, cultural coach, life coach, multicultural life coach. Let's put it that way.
I love it.
Because you have to, Japanese people that live here, or American people that live there, or whatever country lives wherever, people need help navigating cultures. And I'm not going to say I'm an expert in one thing or another, but I do feel like I have a pretty firm footing in Japanese culture and how it relates to us and how we feel in there, in the context of Japanese culture. And there's just a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. Mm-hmm. I always tell my students, Japanese culture is very narrow and very deep. Mm-hmm. And American culture is very wide and very shallow.
I love that description.
And we need to deepen our culture, which is, I think, what you guys are doing, is you're trying to deepen the culture, trying to put down some roots and say, this is who we are. We're exploring who we are, and we deepen it. And the Japanese, on the other hand, need to widen a little bit and let other people in and let other people have a say. So that's what I do. Teach classes, teach students, workshops. I've been doing a cooking class for like 10 years for Japanese women. They want to know, quote unquote, American food. I'm like, well, I don't really know what that is, but I can teach you what I cook.
What's your best dish to teach?
They love doing a roasted chicken. Okay. They love doing that. It's like, it blows their minds. A whole chicken? We're roasting the whole chicken? Yes, we're roasting the whole chicken. And then if you get into a turkey, it's like ridiculous. But we do the chicken, and they love that. I have a herb garden, so we'll go out and pick the herbs, and they're just like, what is happening? It's this, we don't do this in Japan. Nobody has a herb garden. Nobody roasts a whole chicken. So that's a lot of fun. Okay. And then the nonprofit is called Study Japanese in Arlington, SJA. You can find it at sjastudy.org. And we started in 2018 advocating for Japanese language programs in Arlington Public Schools. Turns out Arlington Public Schools was going to cut Japanese from the curriculum that year. And they're looking for ways they can cut budgets. And they wanted to focus on the critical languages of Arabic, Russian, and Chinese. And decided that Japanese didn't have enough students, couldn't pay the teacher, etc. So a bunch of us rallied and went to school board meetings and saved Japanese in Arlington. Now that, speaking of how God works in God's time for glory, they have hired a second Japanese language teacher in Arlington Public Schools. So they went from one part-time to 2 full-time teachers because we are there advocating for the program. What a difference an advocate makes in any situation. And it's hard to advocate for yourself, right? So if you have somebody else advocating for you, whatever it is, at the doctor's office, at the driver's license bureau, wherever you need help, what a difference an advocate makes. So SJ then decided to branch out and start doing Japanese language and cultural workshops and classes, free or low cost, to the community. And we just had a great time. We just did a tea ceremony using my church facility. They've been very generous in renting us the space. I know. It's perfect for me because I'm like, I have a key to that church. I can get extra chairs. I know how to open the kitchen, It's been so much fun doing these events. And we're actually going tomorrow. We made this beautiful peace panel, origami peace panel in the Ukraine colors. So the top is, it's a sunflower, which is the flower of Ukraine. And the top is yellow and the bottom is blue. And throughout events in 2022, kids and adults made origami doves, hearts, and cranes and pasted them on this panel. And it's become this community art project, which I love. I thought we'll just have people from all walks of life and backgrounds, whatever, contributing to this. And we're taking it tomorrow to a cafe in Adams Morgan that's agreed to accept it and display it for us. Nice. As a wish for peace. And like the kind of things that come out of thinking back, okay, 6-year-old me, had no idea that I'm here going to a Ukrainian cafe tomorrow to dedicate a piece of art that my nonprofit has made for them. And, merging the Japanese sort of wish for peace with what's going on in the world, right now. It's just such a moment. And then people come together, the people that you need, like Bono says in his new book, the people that you need in your life are literally right in front of you. Mm. And sometimes it's hard to believe that, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, I don't know where those people are, but look how we met.
Right.
People we right need are literally right in front of us.
Yeah.
And his point is, you just have to be open to that, and you just have to see people, and you have to still small voice and stop and listen, and then you'll see. And that's a leap of faith for me, believing that all the people I need are right in front of me. But yet time after time, like this origami project, this group of 4 women came together and we did this. And you go I'm sure you guys have examples too, where you just do projects, you do things, and you're like, wow, that really worked out. How did that work out?
I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm just thinking about like how Jesse and I met, and how like I just don't know. I don't want to get all emotional during Advent and Christmas, but I'm just thinking like I don't remember life before I met them. Mm-hmm. Like I really don't. Like I look forward to the text messages and like just the conversations and bouncing ideas. And I'm just thinking this whole elders thing has just been much more cooler. Knowing you, Jesse. I just want to let you know that. But I'm just like, and I don't even remember the encounter. It was probably something so like every day of another meeting or something like that. And it just morphed into this beautiful relationship.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying, Jennifer, at the beginning when you were talking about, here's this girl that didn't seem to have any friends. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I want to be your friend. And it wasn't a matter of, she seemed like an outsider. And, despite what people pointed out to you, your relationship went beyond communication. It went beyond skin color. It went beyond whatever. It was just a matter of, here is this person right in front of me, and I am being led to her. And then your life in some crazy way unfolded from there, which is kind of beautiful.
It is almost as if the invitation to live started.
Mm,
At
Like
6
you
years old, yeah.
invited Kana,
mm.
but by inviting Kana to be your friend, just opened your whole world.
I love that invitation to life.
Yeah.
This
And
is
then even in the way that it was done of going to her house and being welcomed with food, like how biblical is that in so many ways, of being literally brought to the table and like welcomed in, and do you need anything? What can I give you? I mean,
everyone
Matthew
is welcome at
25
the
right
table.
there.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Everyone is welcome at the table, right?
Oh, yes.
You know, here's a funny story. I have a bunch of Muslim friends, and they wanted to go to Christmas Eve service. So you know, it was a traditional Christmas Eve service with all the Muslims, and you know, because that's just my life. And then the Muslims do believe in Jesus. They, you know, they
Right.
do believe he was a prophet. They respect him. They have a lot of respect for Christianity. But we're all sitting there, and we're passing the communion, and I'm thinking to myself, how is this going to go down? And then I asked Pastor Brian after, I said, is it okay that Muslims are taking communion in the church? And he said, oh, it's fine. He said, the worst case scenario is it doesn't take.
I can't.
So, and then
I don't think the churchy people are going to get that joke.
No.
But it is so funny to me.
and we're lining, you know, we lined up, they all wanted to take pictures, you know, and it's beautiful on Christmas Eve. You know, this was back when you had actual candles, you know, so we're all posing in front of the church. And it, you know, it's not the first Christmas Eve that I had a crew of people, you know, Japanese people or Muslim people or whatever that wanted to see church. People are drawn to church.
Yes.
And they want to see the rituals. You know, Bono was saying as he gets older, he wants to see the rituals more. He leans on the rituals more. And the quote is something like, what worked for you in the first half of your life doesn't work for you in the second half of your life. And you have to shift those things. And in the first, and that's in relation to church. I think he was talking about that. And you know, I feel that way too. The rituals are important.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you lean on them a little more. The sacraments, the rituals. So we're taking pictures in front of the church, and you know, people don't usually do that after Christmas Eve service. Usually, you know, silent night, joy to the world, go home, go to sleep, right? Look at Christmas lights on the way home. And we're standing there taking all these pictures, and Lynette walks by and she goes, "What is this? The beautiful people pageant?" Because they're all, you know, kind of dark, and you know, they're not, you know, good looking people. It's just the usual, you know. Jennifer brings a bunch of, and my church, you know, God bless them, they are so sweet, because Japanese people are always coming to events that I'm doing, or some Japanese people came to the 150th anniversary. And when anyone in my church, anyone sees anyone Asian, they rush to find me. Jennifer, there's a Japanese person loose in the church.
That's like if anybody looks like they're under 40 that walks in my church. They come
Shawnee,
to
there's a
find
young
me.
person.
Yeah. Do you know them?
There's a young person.
Do you know them? But that's the question. Do I know them? No.
Yeah.
Everybody under 40.
Yeah, and most of the time they are people I've invited, but sometimes just a random Korean person or somebody that walks in, and we get matched up, and you know, I can talk to Korean people. That's fine. And they're always, Korean people are also comforted by me having lived in Japan. So there's that kind of cultural, it's not the same culture, but they're very adjacent to each other. So when I say, oh, I speak Japanese, I'm a Japanese teacher, they're like, oh, really? I learned Japanese. I've been to Japan. And it's this important connection. So, you know, you never know who's going to wander into church on a given day, but it's just funny how the ushers are always running around trying to find me. Jennifer, Jennifer, okay, they're supposed to be here. We're doing a tea ceremony. Oh, okay.
Jennifer,
there-
go ahead. Go
No,
ahead,
no, no,
Jessica.
it's okay. It's okay.
No,
Go ahead.
no, you had a question because I was about to
No.
wrap up.
Oh, it's okay. It's kind of going to steer us in a different direction, and I can edit it into a different part of the podcast. But
Got
I was
it.
just wondering, because this is embracing race and there's truth, with intention. And I was just wondering if, as you were talking about, this person was Korean and not necessarily Japanese, and not all Asian people are the same, obviously. Like, where in your experiences have you sort of run into any sort of dissonance, be it amongst, white people as like the resident, Asian expert, or even amongst other Asian people of, here's this white girl coming in and obviously you're not appropriating culture, but there are a lot of white people that do appropriate Asian culture, be it Japanese culture, Korean culture, Chinese culture, whatever it is. And here you are coming in with genuine intention of sharing. This is the deepness of this Japanese culture, and this is how it's transformed my life, and I want to share it with you. Where have you run into dissonance along the way, or have you?
Yeah, that's beautiful, Jesse, just the way you put the question. I practice Japanese tea ceremony. I've been practicing for about 8 years. And whenever I do a workshop or a presentation of any kind, I always start with kind of joking, I am not Japanese. I'm not pretending to be Japanese. I may be wearing Japanese clothes or doing something that Japanese culture does, but I'm doing it out of a place of appreciation and learning. I'm not saying that that's perfect. I'm sure there's more places for me to work on, but I always approach things that way, that I'm a student of the culture and I'm learning. And sometimes you get people who kind of come in, and I do speak Japanese fluently. I spent 10 years learning Japanese. So I think I can claim that as something that I can do. I spent 10 years studying Japanese. And sometimes, especially white men, will get in some kind of language battle with me. Like they know Japanese better than me. And I'm not a competitive person. I'm a collaborative person. So it's not fun for them because first of all, my Japanese is always better than theirs. Second of all, I don't compete. Mm-hmm. So they don't know what to do with me when I'm not competing. I'm not interested in beating someone at that. It's not a thing that you compete in. So I do find that problem where white, usually men, will somehow think they know better. They will know Japan better than me or know Japanese better than me. And it's frustrating because that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be in the trenches together. We're in this pit together and we're helping each other get out. That's the metaphor for life. Mm-hmm. And if you can't be in this pit with me and help me get out, then I don't know what to do.
Right.
That's tough. And then of course then there's little things like everybody's like bless my grandmother's friend one time. This is the backwoods in Pennsylvania. This is so far out there that no Asian person has ever been anywhere in this town. And she had a open house for me one time when I was visiting from Japan, and one of her hairdresser was there, and it's like you can just see the scene. And the hairdresser says to me, with like intention, she wasn't being silly. With intention, she said, "So Jennifer, you live in Japan?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, what language do they speak there? Is that Chinese?"
No.
No. I said, "No, actually Chinese is not even really a language. There's Mandarin and Cantonese, but that's a different point. In Japan, they speak Japanese." And she was like, "Oh," but not out of a place of like trying to be, it's just, she just didn't know.
Yeah.
So, you do end up with, I described two extremes, the guy that thinks he knows everything to, a person that is struggling to know and just hasn't had the tools to learn about things.
Mhm.
Both struggles. So I'm open to any help with that. Thank you
I
for that.
love that question. Great question, Jesse. Jesse always coming through with a great question.
Yeah.
Well, we are about at our time together, and I just want to thank you again, Jennifer, for coming on. And as we close out, what gives you hope, just in general?
Well, of course, it's Advent, so I've skipped ahead and I'm listening to Christmas music. And so don't tell the Presbyterians. And that song, "Oh Holy Night, the stars are brightly shining," right? And it is the night of the dear Savior's birth. And then the thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm holding on to, is that the weary world rejoices. We are weary. It's a given that we are weary from the journey. And that's where Jesus meets us, in our weary world. And that's what gives me hope.
Amen.
Thank you.
Are you going to use that in the sermon this week?
I don't even know. I am still playing with this text. So
yeah.
I'm
I look forward to it.
Well, I appreciate you.
I'll be there smiling at you.
All right. Thank you so much.
The Embracing Race podcast, hosted by elders Shawnee McElwain and Jesse Littlejohn, tackles all topics from pop culture to faith and the intersectionality of white supremacy and racism. Nothing is off limits, as we hope to educate and transform with radical love. For more information, visit us at embracingrace.online or on Instagram at embracing_race_podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you would like to submit a comment or question, please email embracingracepodcast@gmail.com. We are thankful for those who have sponsored the Embracing Race podcast. Shout out to the following groups and people. Gen Out. The Gen Out Youth Chorus. Gen Out is an outreach ensemble of the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. Gen Out's mission is to give young LGBTQ+ and allied youth a voice to connect to the community. The ensemble is open to all singers between the ages of 13 and 18. Please visit www.gmcw.org for more information. Interwoven Congregations. Isn't it our hope that we would all come together as a society across the chasm of race and become the beloved community that Dr. King imagined? Interwoven Congregations' mission is to organize and support partnerships between faith communities with different racial compositions in order to foster racial justice and healing. For more information, please visit www.interwovencongregations.org. HOD Records. HOD Records is a talent and artist development company that specializes in artistry development and content creation. Serving the DMV and beyond, HOD creates a family-centered management style that promotes a collaborative spirit. Check out HOD Records on all social media platforms and visit hodrecords.media for more information. If you would like to be a sponsor of the Embracing Race podcast, please email embracingracepodcast@gmail.com.